Hey everyone, it's me, Stephanie Nietzsche, and welcome to Writer Talk. My guest today is J.S. Lamb. Jim, how are you?
I am doing great. We hadn't had a chance to go into detail, but I was in the hospital for about 2 or 3 months and rehab 2 or 3 months, and
Oh
now I'm back
no.
home and I'm trying to catch up. The irony is they gave me an operation called a lammectomy, and of course last name is Lamb, and what it means they remove one or more of your uh, part of your spine out because
Really? Oh my
I'd
God,
been
what happened? Like, why did you have to have that surgery?
I'll tell you, I think it was June or July. On a Monday, I was fine. I was walking. By Wednesday, I was in trouble walking. And by Friday, my wife was calling 911. And it took them
No.
2 weeks to find out what was wrong.
So you were in
And
the hospital for 2 weeks before they found out what was wrong?
right, because they ran tests and then
Wow.
the doctor ordered more tests. And you know how communication can be. And finally,
Exa-
he said, I'm sending you to the emergency room now. They demanded the tests. I got
Wow.
transferred to another hospital that night, and they wanted to operate right away, but I had been taking blood thinners, so they had to wait
Right.
4 days, which was during one of the hurricanes in Pinellas County,
Oh my
and
God.
it was. I mean, the longer ago it is in my memory, the funnier it is. But it wasn't
Um,
funny months
No,
ago.
at the time, right? It's never funny. All we just cannot wait to be home, right? Because sometimes we're in the hospital, we feel worse than we did before we
Uh,
got there, right? And we just can't
well,
wait to get home. But
I
I'm
had
so glad,
you have too much time to think. That's the biggest problem. But
right,
fortunately, about 5 hours a day, I was in rehab, which is mainly exercises. And then they did rehab with me, a physical therapist at home for 2 months. And I just got signed off on that. So this week is actually the first time I'm on my own without someone checking on me. So
wow. Well, welcome back. I'm sure
thank
you're thrilled to be home. And
all.
you're feeling better?
Yeah, those phases go through denial, and I forget what the others. And I'm in the final one at acceptance. And I may not walk again, but I have more mobility than they expected. So you gotta go with what you got, not with what you hope you have. And besides,
Exactly.
I learned early on as a writer, everything can turn into a story. So that's my great hope that there's a book in there somewhere.
Isn't that the truth? So do you plan on writing about this?
Yes, I'm going to wait a little bit, so I'm not as sympathetic toward myself as I would have been early on.
I
Because
got
if
you.
the humor doesn't come in, I've got nothing. Which is
Right.
why I did my book Orange Socks, because I had it easy in the Navy in Da Nang, Vietnam. I worked on radios, so it was like MASH, but radios instead of people. And so I didn't have to carry a gun, although I kept one in where I worked on the radios. And only once, no, twice. Once I was at the end of the runway with a gun I had never been trained on,
Oh,
and they
wow.
said, "No, you're not allowed to load this unless you get permission." I said, "Okay." I said, "And you can't shoot unless you get permission." Well, I'm at the end of a long runway with no microphone, no telephone. And so I took my harmonic out. So I thought, well, at least if they hit me, they should get some free music out of it. Because that's funny. But at the time, I was terrified.
Exactly, exactly. And your book is titled again, Orange Socks
Orange Stalks and Other Tales, not its
and Other
original name.
Tales.
It,
And
it
that's
started
a
off. Uh, it started off as a lot of little pieces. It took me 5 years of writing notes down to see which one of them deserved to be turned into a story, and then another five
ah,
years of writing. Because I don't know how your memory is. Mine is just scattered pieces, and sometimes a word or a sentence will trigger something, and
ah,
I can elaborate that. And then when I reached the end, and I had been calling it Enchanted War for reasons too long to go into. For me, Vietnam was kind of an enchanted place. I felt safer there than I would have felt in the States on some days. But
Wow.
I thought if I get the humor of this, which is how I cope with it, then it's going to be fine. But if I try to have it be something it wasn't, because it was tedious work working, on radios. And somewhere in there, everything just seemed to click. So that 5 years of thinking and 5 years of writing, it wasn't a great success. I think my best months, I may have sold 100 a month. I did a lot of trading. Like I did an article for somebody and they would give me space. I did an article with someone else. They got me free ads in USA Today. I pulled out all the
Wow.
stuff. And did a bunch of interviews. And then the second book came along, which was the poetry book. And at about the time I would have been marketing that, I began that long path of knowing I had a problem and not knowing what it was. So I'm only a year behind, but I've already started compiling my third book, which is going to be a collection of short stories / articles that I wrote when I was at Trivia.
Oh, I think that's going to be very interesting. Just going back to your first book for a second, when
Yeah.
did you start writing that? Did you write your little notes while you were in the military, or did
No,
you? Okay.
no. What I would tell stories, and sometimes people would laugh, and then of course, if you're going to get a laugh, you want two, and if you're getting two, you want three. So I would had 5 or 6 stories I would tell. They would laugh, and then my buddy Sam Harris said, "You got to write these down." I said, "Sammy, nobody cares. Trust me, they don't care. I mean, they didn't care about Vietnam when I was there. They're certainly not going to care about it now." And he said, "No, you got to write it down because number one, it's funny, and number two, it's your story." Well, what I didn't
Right.
realize, and you learn things in the process. One of the guy who was interviewing me was a Vietnam vet. By the time he interviewed me, he'd probably done 50 or 60 interviews with veterans, many of them Vietnam. And he says, "You're the only one he'd run into, that you made it funny." And he said, I was kind of surprised by that. He liked the book, gave me a great, positive vibes. But I said, it wasn't so much that it was funny, is that if you have a coping mechanism that hinges on humor, that's where your mind goes. And so the book, which has some funny moments, has some sad moments. I got a Dear John letter from my first wife in Vietnam. And that was one of the most devastating things in my life. And
I
and
could
you
imagine.
got to get the range of emotions so you seem real.
Right, right.
And it was.
Oh yeah, that is something that, yeah, that's a tough one. So far away, and you can't instantly communicate with someone, and you just have this letter
Yeah.
that you're going on, and you had no idea at the time what was going to be in it, right? You just thought it was going to be
I was about 4 months from getting out of the service. Um, I was, the white fence and the cottage. I mean, I was living a fake dream, but that's what I was holding on to. And I thought,
right.
this is going to be great. Gave the Navy my 4 years. I spent my time in Vietnam. I'm going to go home. I had a cutest little bit daughter. And then I get a letter in June, I think it was that year. Dear Jim. And I don't remember much except that's probably where that part of the grieving started. You know what I mean? It's like I didn't know how to react. I didn't know what to do. I felt physically ill and emotionally just pulled out like silly putty. But that's an important part of the story. I mean,
Sure.
you've got to be able to, at some level, share pain uh, because it resonates with other people who have different situations, but uh, they have a pain, you have a pain. If you resonate, even if it's for that page or two, there's a connection.
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree. Now, with your first book, the humorous book, how long
Yes.
would you say that took you to write?
It took 5 years of me
Just 5
thinking,
years of you thinking before you even put it all
thinking.
together?
I didn't know if I was going to have a book. I knew I had pieces of stories. So
Right,
I
right.
would write. And then when I walked around with a book, it's about about that size, but smaller so you get into a pocket. But that was about this far, if you can see it. So I'm walking around and I'm jotting. And at that time, I was retired. Well, yeah, I was semi-retired. And my wife had a job where she had to drive places. So I'd go with her, drive part of the way. And then she would be gone for a day doing marketing things. And I'd sit and jot down notes. And there came a point when the book was full and I was kind of empty that I transcribed all of that to a typewriter, double and triple space, printed that out, and then went with two color pens, red and blue. I forget which one I used for which, but I would put an X through something, or I would say this might work, or this one, and then jot down more notes. So I had a lot of area, a lot of acreage to work with. And then once I had that, I went back through all those pages, and there were quite a few, and said, well, where are the stories? So then I just started writing the stories, not sequentially, which turned out to leave me in a mess later, but you learn how to clean that mess up. That's a great thing about having been a journalist.
Oh my gosh.
So
I can't even imagine you flipping through all of those pages, because now we work on laptops and computers, but we forget that writers started out by hand, right? Pen and paper, pencil and paper, typing on a typewriter. And that, right? We forget about all that. That's why it took you so long to do all that.
And the great thing about writing is there's something, this sounds silly, there's something human about it. When you click clack, like right now I'm in front of my iMac, and I've had this for I think 5 years, 6 years. And it's been a great tool. And before that, I had the older iMac that was like half a basketball. And before that, I had I think it was the original iMac. It was like a box. And before that, 1983, if you want to go back far enough, I had what they call a K-Pro, which was, they called it a portable, but it was like walking around with a little tank. But it had a nice keyboard. One of the reasons I bought it, and it jived with what I was doing at work. But the thing is, getting back to the human part of writing. You can feel something in a letter, meaning a script letter or a printing. When you're angry, when you're sad, when you're depressed, there's something changes in your writing, and this is where you have to take a leap of faith with me. That jumps into your mind. So if you're just reading text, you're reading a book, you're reading anything on a computer. Those letters are isolated and they connect as words, but there's nothing that stands out. If it's courier, if it's not press, the kind of like Bodoni, for example, we use on our headlines at the Tribune, the New York Times, we use for the body copy. There's not an emotion there. That is the functional thing that happens. So that goes to your brain and it fires off. When you're reading your own writing and you're in touch with what you were doing, you say, oh yeah, I remember. That's when I cried. That's when I thought about blowing my brains out. That's when I was really to go AWOL and go home, all those things. And you see that little squiggle that's different. And that triggers not just a memory, but the emotion connected with that memory. And that helps me. Other people might not have the patience, but I had a lot of time. The one thing I had was time. And so when I got done and I strung them together, I realized it was incoherent. It was these great little stories. And I'm tough on myself, but the little stories are great, but they didn't have a rhyme or reason. So what I did, you should write it yourself. You'll enjoy this. I wrote a prologue to set them up. I wrote an epilogue to close it down. And I tried to arrange them as best I could so they seemed like a sequence. And the people who liked it because you could start anywhere in the book to read a given story. Or you can write front to back or back to front. And each of the stories stood on their own. And that, I think I'm most pleased with that because some people don't want to read a book, but they'll read 20 short stories. So that was kind of my shtick on that. And like I said, the stars aligned with that one because I was freelance writing news release magazines and whatnot. I remember I did a article for somebody, and there was, you know how you go back and forth on pay. And I said, I'll tell you what, they had a list of, I think it was 6 or 8 magazines. One of them was a Vietnam magazine out of, I
Oh,
think, Virginia. So I said, tell you what I'm going to do. I'll do the article, and you can't pay me the 2 or 3 grand it's worth. I'll trade you for whatever ad you can give me in that magazine. And I got a
oh,
big out of it. And because I did work for somebody else, I traded that work to have them design the ad, which I still have around here somewhere. So I was in my 60s, so I had a lot more energy, but it just lined up. And like I said, I realized with that kind of book, having a good 6 months where there was, 15, 20 a month, that's great,
right,
because it did not fit the norm. Because the best selling books about Vietnam are the ones that the guys who got shot at and they shot and things blew up. And I worked on radio, so I had to go with what I got. Now, to give you the difference in the reactions, some people just loved it, and they it wasn't said that this is great. You could feel the affection, and if you, it's still on Amazon somewhere. You can read some of the summaries or reviews. There was an affection for the book, and that's very human, and that's what I wanted. But then I had one guy read a sample page, and he was a Marine. So if you know Navy Marines, it's like swabbies and jarheads. I mean, it's like the cousin you don't get along with, but he's part of the family. So he wrote 2 words. One was not, no, 3 words. One was not satisfactory. No, 2 words, unsatisfactory. And I thought, okay, coming from a Marine, yeah, I'll buy that. But the other one, he said maggot. And I said, well, actually, coming from a Marine, that's par for the course. Those stung me, but it didn't hurt,
right,
because I thought, the Marines out there with guns, they had to go in the jungle, they had to go into the holes, they had to do what they went through. I couldn't do. On the other hand, I could only tell the stories I had,
exactly. And
and
your experience, everyone has their own experience, and this
exactly,
was your experience.
exactly. And the truth be told, you know this too. People can tell if you're faking it.
Right.
And I thought, well, they at least I love the word. I don't know if it's still popular, but I was authentic.
Authentic.
I I I bled on those pages. It may not be it may be paper cut blood, but it's still it. I had to
Right,
relive things I didn't necessarily want to relive. But
right.
anyway, that was I think 5 years ago now, and
Well, I
it's
feel like everyone should be entitled to tell their own story, and that's just the way it is. We can't write things to satisfy other people or to appease other people. We all have our stories and we tell them like it is.
and
And I think that's very important. And that's where you get the authentic. When you
exactly.
said the word authentic, that's where you get that from. You were being authentic. If you would have told it any other way, that would have been someone else's story or just fiction. It wouldn't have even been, you know what I mean? It just would have been a random story.
No, you're right. And if there are writers who are struggling, there's just 2 or 3 little things I want to share that are important. When I sat down to do the book, I wasn't trying to do a book. You understand? In other words, I wanted to get all the ideas to
Right.
see if I had it. And that takes a lot of pressure, because that leaves a lot of wiggle room to think about things. And I know people have this idea of it's probably, there's probably a name for it, but the blank, staring at the blank page. There's no such thing as a blank page. That's all in your brain. I mean,
Right.
when I was a journalist, sometimes I worked by assignment, meaning the down. I worked in Pasco County, where I live, and Tampa Tribune was in Tampa. That's about an hour drive, 45 minutes.
And this is all
They
in
would,
Florida, correct? This is
all in
Florida.
Florida. And they would say, okay, Newport has a city council meeting tonight. There's going to be a couple of controversial votes. Get in there, talk to the people, read the agenda, blah, blah, blah. So my expectation kind of coming out of a meeting from prior experience, I'm going to have 2 to 7 stories. One of them already I know is going to be a big deal, and a couple other may be worthy of it. So you go into that with the attitude there's already a story there. It's up to me to dig it out, and that means I'm not looking at a blank page. The other thing is,
Mm,
and this has happened to me, and there's a comical aspect to this. I don't know that I can communicate it. It was I was in news and then sports and then went back to news. And the day I'm supposed to go to sports, I go to bed. I'm a news guy, but at 7 in the morning, I'm a sports guy. So of course, 1 o'clock in the morning, the only adult store in West Pasco County that I'm familiar with is on fire. So I'm going to go there after I've already told the guy. So technically, I think after midnight, I'm a sports guy, but I'm going to go because it's who are you going to find?
right,
And I
right.
went there, ran into a photographer. We put together a nice little story, and the humor of it being is that building gets burned down because I guess guys going into it bring cigarettes and they're not supposed to smoke, and
Mm,
the whole thing burned down. And that's a shock to your system because for one thing, you get the call in the middle of the night. You don't know what to do. That's happened to me a few times. But you do know you have a story you must produce, and now
right.
you're on kind of a floating deadline. They wanted it 5 minutes ago. Well, I have to find out how the fire get started. Was anybody hurt? Were anything else affected? And all that.
Yeah.
It wasn't a great story, but it was a decent story. I at least made the front page of the local edition, and you
Yeah,
have to
it's
be
great.
prepared for that. You journalism is so great because you can prepare and still get surprised, and sometimes it's good,
Right,
sometimes. But
right,
you never don't have anything. You never
right.
say, "Oh, I went to a fire to the adult bookstore. There's really not a story there." Your editor doesn't care. He's already left the space out.
Right,
He's
for
counting
that
on you.
story, yeah.
He's counting on the photographer to have a picture. You don't come back and say, "I really was inspired. I was kind of tired." Blah blah blah.
I got up in the middle of the night and dragged myself over there to the fire.
But that's one of the reasons I love journalism because you they don't. You can have the best story in the world today, and guess what? It doesn't count tomorrow.
Right,
I
right.
need 5 more stories. I need 3 more photographs. So you get into that. It's almost like being a junkie. That adrenaline
The
fix.
adrenaline, right. I could see
So
that, yeah.
if you're coordinating, I did one time coordinated. I think it was I forget. I think it was Hurricane Andrew. But anyway, Labor Day weekend, everybody goes away. I have a lot of work to do. I do the short straw, so now I'm staying there. Okay, no big deal. Quiet weekend. My boss says, just catch up on your paperwork. Nobody's expecting anything. Well, that's when something happens. And whatever hurricane it was, it had me with half the staff we normally have, writers, photographers, and artists, trying to put this together for one of the bigger stories, at least of that month. And
Right.
no excuses. So when they came back, I got a pat in the back and this and that. Good job, blah, blah, thumbs up. And the next day it was sort of like, how come you don't have all your paperwork done? And I'm thinking, I'm coordinating people from all over this part of the state and people out of West Central Florida. And I had to sleep in the Tribune one night because they wouldn't let us out. And then when I went out and looked in the parking lot, the water was up to the car doors.
Oh my
And this is
gosh.
none of could have been expected. And yet you have work to do. So you learn to juggle. I would call it's a wonderful madness because
Mm,
you have the thrill of pulling it off. There's nothing like it. When you fail but come close, it's still great. When you fail, that scars with you for not forever, but for months. When I retired and now I'm freelance writing magazines, I have to somehow get the adrenaline up because, yeah, it's a deadline. You only have 2 months to do this. 2 months. Tell me I have 2 weeks. don't, tell, don't tell me 2 months. I got to lie to myself so that I can get the adrenaline going to get the job done. Does that make
Right,
sense?
right.
So
So do
that's
you
one of
do
the
you feel
yeah.
as a journalist, do you feel like when you would get a call in the middle of the night or you had to just appear somewhere because there was a story, your brain is like always on?
Oh yeah,
Like it was easy to just be there, like to snap on. It was like an automatic,
oh
like
yeah,
that's what your brain would do.
yeah,
Automatically be ready to work.
yeah. And you go into I all I can do is tell stories. There was kids chasing my kids, two kids chasing my like 5-year-old daughter. So I chased them and I cornered them in the alley, and I wasn't going to do anything. But I was so angry because they
Right,
my little girl's on a tricycle, they're on bicycles, they run off the sidewalk. So rather than hit them, which would have been wrong and put me in jail and who knows what, there's a
right.
4x4 holding up a stairs. Now I was in construction before. I should have known that was just not a 4x4. That was pressure treated hardwood holding up the upper stairs, and I hit it, and what they call a puncher's break or something. So I'm cracking these knuckles. I go to the hospital. They put a cast on. I'm in pain. They give me painkillers. The next morning, I'm nauseous. I'm just, I can't eat any food. The medicine's made me wacky or wonky. So I'm on the phone calling my desk where I worked. I was associate graphics editor at the time. And Diane answers the phone. And while I'm on the phone with her, she says, "Oh no." I said, "What?" She says, "The shuttle just blew up." I said, "I'll be there in 5 minutes." So I am
Oh, that
there,
was the space shuttle?
right, the first time.
This
So I
oh,
go in there and I help coordinate the front page. It was a great front page. Our competitor, the St. Pete Times, great newspaper, did a graphic, which was very impressive. And I and my team felt like the picture that made the story was that one where it blows up and goes into a Y. And
oh.
we made that big on the cover. And it was just powerful. So anyway, it's done. We get our deadlines. Everybody's happy. And now the adrenaline wears off. And for the first time that day, I feel the pain. I'm nauseous. I don't know how I made it home that night. But you lather that adrenaline up, and like you
Right.
said, it starts firing things off, and you're at peak performance, and you're making decisions so fast and adjusting them so fast because that was one of the biggest stories of a lifetime that I helped be involved in. That
Right. That's a good
put,
one.
put it out there for the people in Tampa. So does that make sense?
It does, yeah. And
And
wow, that was
it's a love hate thing because I miss it. It's like jumping out of a airplane without a parachute. You say, I'm curious to see how I figure out how I'm going to get down. But anyway, going back to my original point, when I say no such thing as a blank piece of paper, you would, and that's true in journalism. That is absolutely true. I can't say it's true in fiction, but I'm sure in fiction you must learn how to turn those things on and off to keep going. Otherwise, I don't know how you get past page one. You know,
right, right.
on
Well, just yeah, distractions don't help because you're so in the story when you're writing, just like when you were a journalist and you had to, cover that moment and the adrenaline was going and you were feeling everything. The same thing when you write fiction, you're in the moment. It's make believe, but in your mind it's real because you're creating that scene. You become the characters. You hear them. You feel them. It's just yeah. You just become in the moment. So and hours can pass. And there were times that I wrote from the time that I got up and it was nighttime and it felt like 3 hours and it was like 13 hours,
wow,
with the writing because You just, when you are on a streak or a flow and you're writing, you just get so lost in someone else's story. And it's like you're living it. It's weird. You're just the vessel sitting there and typing, but the story, it's really quite amazing. So let me ask you this: since you were a journalist,
Yeah.
now you were a journalist before you published your book,
No.
before you published the first book, or
No.
how did?
Here's what happened. I was in construction most of my life up north. Came down here, worked with my brother and my cousin who did. We would put frames. If you go by house when they're building it, you see the block, and there's
Uh-huh.
nothing there. Somebody like my brother or my cousin Steve would take out a blueprint and see where the walls go. They would put the walls down. I'd go back to nail them down initially and use the nail gun later. And then we'll put the roof on and same thing. And I did that. And I did okay. I mean, I fell off a roof, stepped on nail, got blood poisoning, had a 2x6
Oh,
dropped on my head. I mean, everything. That's what convinced me, I really need to get out of construction. And so I saw an ad in the paper for a reporter. Now
for
I
a
was
what?
making a reporter.
Oh, a reporter.
Reporter. And that was probably half the money I was making as a construction guy. But I thought, well, I've always wanted to write. You know how you think, I want to be an astronaut. No, I think a writer. No, maybe a fireman. So I thought I go down there with not having had any real experience writing, except being humiliated at college by my professors. And I do that for like 2 or 3 weeks. And I thought, I love this. They just said, yeah,
Wow.
go here, go there, interview, the whole drill. And then
Mm.
I'm rewriting news release, which turned out to be helpful later because I made a little extra money when I was retired. And I thought, this is it. This is it for me. So I go to put in for the editor's job when the editor leaves to go to a bigger paper. And I got turned down because I did not have a degree. And I said, okay, if I want this,
Um,
I got to get a degree. So I wrote for a couple other places, went to the University of South Florida, double majored in political science and mass communications in what they called the newspaper track. They had newspaper, magazine, radio, television. And within 2 weeks of graduating, I had a job at the Tribune. I had been a weekend correspondent for them or a stringer. When you're a stringer, you're basically, here's $5, sit by the police calls. And if there's a good story, call a real reporter.
ah.
Put me in, coach. No. and then I just went up the food chain. Now, see, I was married, motivated, had a baby on the way. When
Right,
I went
right.
to school the first time, I flunked out, got thrown out, and was under suspicion of drugs. So, what's the difference between those two gyms? Well, maturity is one of them. Responsibility is another. And
Mm-hmm.
I think it was, I don't know, it was Mark, somebody smart like Mark Twain. Maybe it was, well, maybe you'll know when I tell you. They said the two greatest days in a man's life, number one, when he finds out who he is, and number two, when he finds out what he's supposed to do with what he is.
Marcus Aurelius, maybe? Is it possible?
It sounds like somebody really smart. I wish it was me.
Yeah.
But once I found
But
out,
I am familiar with that. I've read it, yeah, quite a few
well,
times
well,
on social media mostly.
and that what hit me, those two things at once is, I can do this. I want to do this. I'm going back to school and get a degree. I had a
Right,
3.75
right.
average, summa cum laude, the same kid that flunked out of school 10 years before. So I'm very happy to have been a writer. Now that I'm retired, I have some bucket list things. One of them, Orange Socks, which if you like humor and MASH, it's the book for you. There's some sad MASH, as you may recall, had sad moments, happy moments, funny. This book has those
Funny
things.
moments, yeah.
The
MASH was
other
so big.
oh, this is my small Kel version. The second thing was free plug here, my book, poetry. I was working on poetry for, you'll love this, for about 5 years. and they just
It
didn't work.
takes time.
And I think I got rid of all but 4 or 5 of them. I mean, they stunk up the place. But why? Well, I didn't know. So 2 poets helped me. Uh,
Mm.
Seamus Haney, who wrote, I think it was called Digging, about his grandfather digging up, out of the peat moss, whatever that is, over in Ireland, I think. And he talked about the one. I can't do the whole thing. I can't do it justice, even if it was in front of me. But he walks out with this thing of milk and has a cap on it. Not a cap like this, but just something to keep the dirt from getting in. And his dad or his grandfather would take it and just drink it. And that moment of the peat's got to be like digging wet coal, and it's a mess,
Mm.
and you're a mess. And that cold, I would call it at that point, sweet, milky flavor on that glass, which is different than drinking out of a paper container. That
Mm.
moment said everything to me. And then he shares in the transition of that poem to how instead of his thumb digging, he uses it to write. Now I butchered that, but even as bad as I butchered it, that thought of taking what your parents do and you have a different talent, but you can connect with them and still get that grit in there. And Haney's the 2 things I remember is that poem and one called Scaffolding, which
Mm.
you've got to look it up and read it. He got so many credits to have it read at weddings, and I can't even try to do that. But you look up those 2. And the other guy, Dylan Thomas, uh, not Death Be Not Proud. It's Death Has No Dominion, I believe. And if you all the famous English guys have a rendition of it, but
Mm.
his is the best. And when you hear it, it's blood and grit and emotion and power, and it just I won't say his voice quivers, but it moves in a way that people's voices don't do.
Right.
It's so powerful. And then there's another one that's much longer. I can't remember the name, but those 2 guys showed me how writing can be as well done as an architect does a building. So if you look at Frank
Mm.
Lloyd Wright and his Falling Water, I think it's called. It's in Pennsylvania, probably an hour drive away from where I was born, and it's just this incredible sculpture of a house that people visit and to pay homage to him and his talent.
Wow.
And yet it's not dainty. You follow me? I guess, and I liked poetry when I was a kid, and I had to memorize part of the Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner. But most poems are dainty, and that's not bad
Mm.
because the doilies dainty, and I think they're rather attractive. But when you have a guy, my grandfather worked in the coal mines 20 years. My other grandfather delivered coal. My dad worked in the coal mines 2 years, World War II, then worked as a carpenter. I worked as a laborer. I like that digging and picking and moving and
Right,
shoveling.
right.
And to take all that physical stuff and somehow get all that blood, sweat, and tears into words on a page, that's what I wanted. But when I
Right.
tried to do it out, it came out either dainty or dull. But when I finally connected those 2 guys, then I went back and started writing again. For it took about 5 years, and reached a point where herding butterflies, which is I use that euphemistically because getting an idea for a poem is not like a journalistic article. I want to go down a few who burned
Mhm.
this thing. It's this idea of there's a part of it. Oh, there's another one, and you've got to capture them long enough to get the beauty on the page, but not hurt them so they can fly away when they're done. And
Ah.
I love them. I'm irrational like I am with my kids and grandkids. These poems mean a lot to me, and there are a whole range of things. There might be 1 or 2 dainties in there, but by and large, there's a different kind of power. And I do want to read at least one before I leave, but that's how I got there. Now I'm compiling my short stories for that book a year late, and then in a year from now, when you talk to me, I should have finished my novel. That's next on my bucket list.
And that is going to be about.
Most likely, it's going to be called, because I started working on the first part. It's called Roadster. Now, the guys will like this because roadsters are like, zoom zoom down the road. Happens to be about the Corvette, which I had the good pleasure of owning for about 2 years, and then you reach a stage in your life where getting in and out of a Corvette, it can't be done elegantly anyway. But when it starts causing pain, you say, I give up. Anyway, it's about a guy who writes magazine articles, and someone talks him into writing about these cars, Corvettes, takes him to a Corvette show at Eckler's, which is on the other. It was based on, I went there 2 or 3 times, and how a guy who's not a car guy begins to understand the car culture, how complicated it is, and the pecking order, and the money, and the prestige, and he's just covering it like as if it were me, and he ends up buying a sports, not a Corvette, but a Miata at the end, which is sacrilege to anybody who has a Corvette. But that worked for him. But it's his growth, and in the context of these cars and all the people he meets in this long weekend. And I have it outlined and the first chapter written. So
okay.
I'm a year. If I got to get short stories out of the way first.
So as opposed to being a pantser, you do outline. You outline your work. Or you're a little bit of both. There's a term for that too.
A little bit of both. When I was a journalist, I won't go into this, but they used what they call the inverted pyramid, because the idea is you used to send them across
Yeah.
Morse code.
Morse
and
code,
you were done, you wrote 30. But during the Civil War, for example, you're out in the field, there's been a battle, you go where you can go to do the story. You cover everything first, and that inverted pyramid, it's less and less and less important. It's not like an essay. An essay, you start up here and you get down to the bottom, and boom, there's that punchline. You got to get them in the first, which is true today, I think, even on the internet, 3 to 8 paragraphs. At the end of 3, they got to know what the story is, and they have to be convinced that reading more is important to them, because they're not reading it for your benefit. During the Civil War, they never knew when the line was going to go out, or who was getting it, and how much space they had. They just wrote it. So they would start cutting not from the top, but from the bottom. And then they would find a paragraph that sort of ended it. So you really write a beginning and a lot of endings, with the least important thing at the bottom. And yes. So that's not really outlining, but that works. That can serve you well in that context. But of course, if you write essays, and I do want to do a book of essays someday, I have to really learn how to do that. So I do get the punchlines in the right place. But my inclination is, if I haven't told you what this story is about 3 paragraphs, fire me and get somebody who can.
I got it.
Novel. I mean,
when you do your outlining, do you do it in a book? Do you have a bulletin board? Do you have like a vision board or something that you look at or anything like that? Or is everything basically contained on like in
if I'm doing it, I don't know if you see this.
Oh, that's the book. Yes, you did. Okay.
That's one of the things I'm working on now. And this happens to be, let me find it here. This might be better. Okay. Here are some things I'm working on. You don't have to read it. I just want to see the scribble. See it?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm going to give you the really short version. The first one is called Massimo, Massimo. He's a little Italian mouse that, like his father and his father before him, worked for Leonardo da Vinci. And all those little things that Da Vinci built before he could build the big one, Massimo, who of course could speak Latin to Da Vinci, Da Vinci would put him in the little helicopter, send him across the room, and
Ah,
then he would give him notes and say, "Ah, Leonardo, I'm getting too much of a noise up here. I can't hear you when you're talking." It's a fun thing, but I wanted to do a lot of research on Leonardo da Vinci. So the
oh,
mouse is like his secret weapon, and he's the only one he can really talk to because his ideas are so far out. So it's a little
oh,
picture
that's
drawings. Now, Ping Ping is missing. This is a story about a red panda, not a panda. But because people confuse the two, the way the cover is going to be designed, it looks like a, what do they call it, Rorschach test? You know what I mean? The splotch of ink,
oh, yes.
but
Yep.
it's going to form the face of Ping Ping. Because when Ping Ping escapes from the zoo, not for the first time, but perhaps the third time, everyone is after him. Some people want a reward, some people want to take him and sell him, but he ends up with kids. So in a way, it's kind of like E.T. And Ping Ping
Yeah.
is, and I have a million ideas, but I dare not start writing it till I get my other things done. Let me give you
Right, right.
one.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a ton of ideas. And you were talking about the cover, which is great because a lot of writers, they're like, what am I going to write about? What am I going to write about? So you have all these ideas, which is fabulous. You just have to slow down a little bit, right? Because you can't write them all at one time. But now you did mention the cover. Do you do your own cover work?
I did on the first one, and I have a story. I was looking for it today and couldn't find it. It took me 2 months to get the cover the way I wanted. And what it ended up doing is very simple. If you go to Amazon, you'll see it. It's a yellow cover, and it's just what they call a balloon, like in a cartoon would be, little text balloon.
Yes. Oh, yes. Yep.
And so what I here's because I did work as a graphic designer for about 2 years, won several state awards. So I wanted to communicate comedy, and
Mm,
I went through all this complicated stuff. And in the end, it hit me. I thought, if you go to a comic book, you go to a comic strip, you're going to see that text box. That's the tip off of what you're reading. So that was my tip off to the reader subliminally that what they're reading is humorous. Not necessarily
ah,
hilarious, but at least humorous on the level of a comic book. And I liked it.
ah,
And I had somebody interviewed me just about the cover for, well, that went 5 years ago. This came out. All I can remember is they liked it and was very intrigued. And I spent like 20, 30 minutes explaining the detail. That's been so long, I can't remember. Other books like this one, if you look in the front of it, Building Butterflies, there it is. You see it?
yes. Yep.
Those started off as about 6 or 8 butterflies that I found somewhere. And then I recalibrated all of them. I changed the color, then I rearranged them. And I just wanted the sense of it says butterfly without saying any more than that. You know what I mean? It's like
Oh,
one butterfly wouldn't have worked. It had to be a variety of butterflies because, like I said earlier, you have the net, you're trying to get them, you're not interviewing them individually. You're just trying to get whatever one you can get, and then you get that inspiration and let them free. And to me, for me as a writer, I'm not a poet, but I'm a writer. Although my one professor said, if you can write as a writer, you can write anything, and I'm trying to prove that with my life. But the idea of the freedom of the butterfly it has inherently, and then the beauty of it that you appreciate, and then you let it fly away. So when somebody reads it, this is like a butterfly landing on their desk, on their computer screen, in their lap.
oh.
And that's the connection I want. It's a very light, fragile, but important connection. And then when they read that particular poem, they're going to feel something. At least that's what I'm going for.
Right. Oh, I think that's beautiful. Let me ask you this about your poetry. When you
Yeah.
begin to write a poem, and then do you finish that poem before you move on to another poem, or how does that work?
That's a great question. Some are whole formed and short. Some are whole formed and long. A few I have a line or two,
Mm.
and I know there's something there, but I don't know what it is. So I'll go back and look at it. And like I said, this is I didn't spend a month doing this. I spent years seeing do I have enough poems for a book? Not could I
Right.
write a book of poems? That's two different things. And so gradually, and I'm going to find one here that's a good example of that, probably or maybe two short ones. You once I feel like I've done. It's like my son when he was 18, he went away to college. I said, son, I've done all the damage I can do. You're in charge of your
Good
life.
luck. You're on your own now.
So, anyway,
So I was going to
these
ask you. So at the end of a poem, when you're done, when your poem is complete, how do you feel? Like, what is the feeling of finishing a poem?
it is like I don't know if you're familiar with. No, I won't get his name. Oh, Jamie Oliver and another guy, Stanley Tucci. Are you familiar with either of those
Oh,
guys?
yep, I'm familiar. Yep, with both of
He's
them.
one of my favorite actors. He did a segment. He did a series on going to Italy, talking to people.
Oh, I remember that. Yes, he has
Here's one.
cookware. He has a
Oh,
cookbook out. He has a lot going on, Stanley
really,
Tucci.
Jamie Oliver is like that, only from England, and he went
Yes.
to Italy. And they go in, and of course they go to the famous stuff, but they don't go to the tourist places. And I'm laughing because I'm thinking of a movie I just saw Vince Vaughn called the Nonus, which is Italian for grandma. You
We
got,
saw that. We watched that. Yeah.
that's it. When you get the food from a Nona, my grandfather came from Italy. His wife, my grandma Patchen, her parents came from Italy. She was born here, but she was the Italians. You're in the family. It's not the mafia family, but you're in that family, and you're going to eat what they eat. And my grandfather had a garden of flowers, a garden of veggies, and he built his own house from pieces of houses that were being torn down. And what you got to the end of the driveway because we didn't have air conditioners then. The end of the driveway, you could smell the sauce that started cooking the night before, and
Uh,
she would make lasagna like you've never seen, using the big things they make the turkeys in that are that deep and they're blue and white, and she would make homemade noodles and then cut them and hang them on the back of the dining room chairs. And she would make bread, and the bread was so big you'd take one slice, cut it in half. It's still too big for a sandwich. That's what I want. That's what I want. The feeling for me and them is like I've just been to Italy and I had no one to make me dinner. Only I
uh,
just read Jimmy's book, and that poem really touched me. Is
that's
that is
wonderful.
that an answer? Because that's how I
Yes,
feel.
that
You
is. That's
Italian. You see, it
yeah.
never stops.
But it all comes together and it all fits, and it was a good explanation of how you feel.
Good.
Yeah,
I want
I
to
definitely got
do
that.
one more thing with the for the writers out there. When I say blank page doesn't exist, it doesn't exist. Here's why. When I'm going to write about Massimo the mouse, I don't know what I'm going to write. It's a good idea. I'm going to stick it out till I finish it. I've already started drawing the mouse, but I'm not going to have face a blank page because the research I'm going to do on mice and Leonardo,
Right.
if ever I hit what looks like a blank page, I say, I'm just going to research this particular invention of Leonardo's. I'm going to look
Right.
at this thing mice like to do. They don't really like cheese, you know what I mean? Stuff like that. So I put that back in. Now I will gather more than I need, but I would much rather do that than say, "Oh, I got to skim." I'm sorry, Jim. No meatballs for you.
Will this
I
be
want
one of
all
your
the
first
meatballs.
book? Will this be like one of your first books that you had to do research for? Because you said you're going to research about mice and you're going to research about Leonardo. Is
In
this
that
like
sense of researching, I researched my mind for orange socks because
Right.
I lived it. So
Right.
in my mind, that's still researching. When I was doing the poems here, I researched, and this isn't what I wanted, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna give you this one. It's one of my favorites. It's a heavy one,
Oh
and
boy.
it's
Okay. What a way to end the show with a heavy poem. Oh
well,
boy. Get your
it's great
tissues out.
because it's like having, yeah, I got room for dessert. Yeah, okay. It's called Midnight More or Less. It's cold outside the castle. Darkness rules the land. Men dress deep in whispers, weapons in their hands. They stand with iced precision, true north locked in their eyes, guards against intruders and snakeskin covered lies. When light comes in the morning, death will ride along with bloody calculations, scented ribbons, and a song. But now's the time for waiting. No hint yet of a fight, just mists and dreams, clouds and steam swirling in the night.
Wow, that was great.
And that imagery as I read it echoes in my mind just like the first day I wrote it. And that's what I want people to feel. The coldness, the mist, the tension before a battle where you know you're not going to sleep.
Right, right.
It
Well,
ends
that was
before the battle starts, so you don't know what's going to happen. It's like the lady and the tiger. He doesn't know what's going to happen,
and
and you're there.
as you read that poem, you did mention imagery. So as you read the poem again out loud, do you visualize
Oh
as you're
yeah,
reading also? Because that's how
that's
I just
all.
took it the way. Wow.
That's all happening in my mind. And when I talked about writing and resonating, that's what I mean. If you put forkless, tuning forks, this one you
Uh-huh.
smack, now it's moving. You move this one close, and at some point, if they're the same resonance, this one will start moving. It doesn't touch. That's what I want the poem to do. I read
Ah,
it. Those words and images hit your brain. That makes a connection, and those images are released. And now it isn't our minds that are connected; our hearts touch in that moment. It's almost scary. It's
oh,
whether it's good or
right,
bad, whether it's happy or sad. It's just, oh my gosh, I felt that.
right. This is why I love to talk to other writers because everyone has something so interesting and it's their own personal take on writing and how you feel, what you see, and what you want to share, and how you want other people to feel when they read your work. So that is incredible. So thank you for that explanation, and thank you for joining me here today too. I mean, we had a wonderful chat. I learned so much about you, and I know you have more work coming up. So we will definitely chat again. But in the meantime, where can everyone find your books and your poetry?
The best thing to do is to go to my not X Files, what it used to be Twitter page, which is called X.com now, because I
Uh-huh.
have links. I have linked to both
But are
books.
you on but are you on Amazon?
Yes, I'm on Amazon. Unfortunately, I work with two different people during the process of posting, and I did not coordinate that, which was my fault. And so they are not on the same page. So if you look up Orange Socks J.S. Lamb, you'll get that. Then Herding Butterflies J.S. Lamb, but they are not connected like they should be.
Well, I'm going to make it easier. Send me the links and I'm going to add them to the comments
Oh,
and
okay.
anything you want to share, your Twitter page, any way people, can find you on social media and the links to your books. That way everybody can find, it makes it so much more simpler. I'd ask you to add it, but I found out that when I do that, it doesn't take, I have to add it myself. YouTube doesn't allow, outside links. I have to do it. So just message me the links and
Okay.
I will put them right in the comments. And that way everybody could find your work and learn more about you. And I have to say, thank you so much for joining me today. It was such a wonderful talk. And I look forward to talking to you again.
Thank you, because, and my wife will tell you, she took our puppy dogs in the next room so they didn't bark. I don't know why I had apprehension, because I've done this before, but since this is my first outing since all that bad stuff started happening last June or whatever it was, it is sort of like, getting back in your first baseball game or football game after a year, and you say, okay, which hand do I throw the ball? But I appreciate your friendly approach. I didn't feel like I was getting a third degree. It was fun, and I hope
Oh,
it was.
good. Good. And you were fun and your stories are so interesting and I'm genuinely interested. So maybe that's you know what I mean? Like maybe some people have shows and they just talk, but I love to hear a writer's personal side. And like I said, the things that you shared about how you want, readers to feel after they have read your poetry, or how you added humor to what was a very serious part of your life and other people's lives when they were in the military or if they were in war. So I love hearing about that. And people that will watch this will also appreciate that because everyone, like I said before, everyone has their own take, their own story to share. And that's what we need to get out as writers, as people, as human beings. That's what we need to get out. And as a writer, we want to connect with people through our stories and through words. And I can definitely see that that is you, Jim, and that is really coming from your heart. You want those stories to really resonate with people. You want them to feel it the way you feel it. So I can definitely see that. So thank you so much. Thank you for your work and thank you for your service. And feel better.
Oh yeah,
I wish you a speedy recovery and
I'm
get writing.
I'm heading in the right direction. If my surgeon's happy, I must be happy.
Good, good. Well, yep, that's a good. If your surgeon's happy, that says a lot. So feel good, and thank you again for being with me today. And it was really a great talk. I had a great time, and I'm glad that we finally got to meet because we've been friends on Twitter for years now. And I was doing writer talks in the past, and then I had just stopped them. But you were always in the back of my mind. And I said, when I start these talks again, I got to reach out to Jim. And that's why I messaged you and said, my talks are up again. Are you want to talk? Are you interested? So it's so good that you still work.
Your timing couldn't have been better. A month ago, I was still wrapped up in physical therapy, and now that that's
Right,
done, I feel free.
right. Good, 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 good. So I'm glad this worked out. I'm glad the timing was good. And thank you for being here. And we'll
Thank you.
talk again.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Bye, everybody. Thanks for watching. And thanks for being here, Jim. And we'll see you soon.
See you soon.
Bye.